Shut up and sit down.
Welcome to Square Ring Podcast, everybody, episode number 41. Tonight we have the pleasure of welcoming Dr. Jeremy Housewright, writer of For the Love of the Show, a book about wrestling stories from the fans' perspective.
How you doing? How you doing, Mr. Housewright?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Cannot complain.
Right
I
on.
got to tell you right from the beginning, I liked your book, man. I can see, actually, I loved your book.
Thank you.
Yeah. Before we get too much involved, where can everyone buy and find your book?
So you can go to Amazon and get it there, or you can go to barnesandnoble.com, find it there. Or if you find me on Facebook, send me a message and you can purchase it directly from me and I'll sign it and mail it to you.
Oh, that is awesome right there. I think that's the route everyone should take.
Yeah.
'Cause anytime you read a book and you enjoy it, it's always nice to have the author's autograph on it. So,
And I will have everything in the description or in the panel that everybody sees up on the side on how to get his book and his autograph. You guys should do it. It's a great book.
Well, that's awesome. So let me ask you, what? I'm going to take you way back before the even book.
Right on.
What? How did you get the love of wrestling in you?
Man, I was 5-6 years old, and my grandfather, God rest his soul, he's been gone now almost 5 years. Used to take me over to the Kiel Opera House for shows when WWF would do house shows. And, I grew up like, I just turned 42 last week. And I grew up like a lot of guys my age watching Hulk Hogan.
Yes.
And Hulkster was my guy as a kid. And so, he'd take me over there to the Kiel and, they do their little live show. It was a little bit different than it is today. It wasn't, you didn't have the pyro and all the electronics and all that stuff. So it was a little scaled back, but, you'd get to see Macho Man and Mr. Perfect. And I even saw Andre the Giant a few times. And of course, Hulk would always be the main event, wrestling, I think it was Ted DiBiase one night and stuff like that. So he would take me over there, every time they were in town. It was usually a Friday or Saturday night. And then we'd go over to the arena, the old barn, to watch them.
Yep.
And, I'd watch Monday Night Wrestling on USA with Bobby the Brain Heenan and Gorilla Monsoon. And, I'd come home from school and watch ESPN. They'd have, we were just talking about before we went live, the Von Erichs, NWA, AWA, Mid-South, stuff like that. So, it was just something that I always was attracted to as a kid. And it was, my outlet from everyday life.
So we ask all the guests, and I already know the answer.
I'll say it's obviously
WWF fan or WCW fan?
WWF all the way, man.
Yes.
And I'm not going to throw shade at the WCW. Well, I might. But, I love Sting. You can't see any Sting stuff behind me, but I do have a lot of Sting signed photos. He's one of my guys. And I grew up liking Ric Flair. And, so I did watch WCW when I was a teenager. I was into it because of the NWO and Goldberg.
Yeah.
But, I went to a couple live shows, but I was always a WWF guy at heart.
Yeah. So Bobby is totally a WCW guy.
All right.
But I think it's because I'm older than him that I am truly a WWF guy. Now,
Sure.
I always talk about before I got into the business, it was all WWF. But
Right.
since I became a wrestler and I need to learn about everything with the business, I feel WCW was more of a workers style of wrestling.
Yep.
So, then I watched everything I could. But as a fan, I was the WWF kid, growing up. Hulk Hogan was my favorite too.
Yeah.
See, for me, it was like that second phase of you I had as a kid. I remember having VHS tapes of Dean Malenko and rewinding it. Like, how did he get from here to here and watching it 7, 8,
Yeah.
10 times?
Yeah, it's
Okay. Jeremy, you were a fan of Sting. Do you have anything when he was teaming with the Ultimate Warrior in 88, 89?
No, man. In fact, probably the coolest thing I got with Sting on it is I have a Super Brawl 2 poster signed by him and Lex Luger.
you
So
can't
that's
go wrong with
probably
that.
that's
that's
probably the
awesome.
coolest, kind of a rare item. And my buddy, he marked out over it when he saw that I had it. I picked it up really cheap. I think I got it for like $50
Nice.
at a store that was going out of business when I was on our WrestleMania trip. And
Damn, you stole that.
yeah,
So, believe it or not, and I have spoken to you offline about this, but reading your book, me, you, and Bobby have probably just missed each other throughout the whole wrestling years, I guess you'd say, because your very first chapter, you were talking to actually a good friend of ours, Kurt Gannon.
oh yeah,
About,
Kurt.
yeah. So I don't know if you know all the background with us. Me and Bobby wrestle for SICW,
Okay,
Southern Illinois Championship Wrestling, and Nate is actually the camera guy for them as well.
okay,
So we spend a lot of time talking to the wrestlers that come and go through our promotion, and we work other promotions too. But our home base is SICW.
right.
And when Kurt came into SICW, he's only been in through a couple times,
Hmm.
but he got the unlucky straw that his very first match was against me. And but I made him look great because back then Larry Matisek, he was actually helping run our shows.
Right.
Larry is the ring announcer for Wrestling at the Chase.
Hmm.
But he come to me, he goes, "Hey, I know this is the first time this gentleman's coming in, but I think he's really got a good future, and I want to see what he can do. So why don't you guys have a good match?" And I tell you, it was probably, I mean, at the time, Kurt is like probably double the size that he was back then. He was
Yeah.
a little skinnier, a little less muscle toned, and but he was still throwing those suplexes around. So, I was able to, I hate to say let him, but he's also very strong. So, but he
Mhm.
was able to suplex me a few times, different around the ring and everything like that. But ever since then, me and him have been uh, not close, but we're friends.
Sure.
Everyone in the wrestling locker room, I always say they're, what's the good term? Um,
Frenemies?
No, it's not like we're best friends or acquaintances, I guess you would say, because we all know about each other. But
Sure.
unless you're riding in a 6-hour car ride with someone, then you actually become very close. And I've never
Yeah.
had that, done with Kurt yet. Been on many of those trips, just not with Kurt. But just
Hmm.
from us being around each other and him making his way into SICW, and then when NWA came around and he was actually to be able to be in that ring, I was like, oh yeah, So I video recorded that, threw that all over on YouTube and Facebook for him. I mean, he's just a great guy. There's
Yeah.
two people that I know, well, that I feel is going to make it in the business from this local area, and I say Midwest. And
Hmm.
there's a lot of wrestlers, and there's a lot of wrestlers I haven't met.
Yeah.
But Kurt is one of them that I feel has the right attitude and is goal, centered where he's shooting for that. And a guy named, and I'm going to blow his head up, but Brandon Bretta, I think he's also focused. And if you haven't heard from about Brandon Bretta, he's part of a tag team called the Top Guns.
Okay.
And he's from SICW, but he goes to Memphis, he goes to Kansas, he goes everywhere. I think out of all the wrestlers that I've ran into, those two I think are got a future in the business.
Cool.
And I say blow his head up because we rib him all the time. We constantly. He's the newest. So I also teach at Bob Orton Jr.'s
Okay.
wrestling school called the Ace Academy. Well, Brandon is our second student that graduated. Now he's been graduated for about a year now, and we always rib him and come up to him and say, thanks for the house today. You're the reason why everyone's here, and we've got some great ribs on him too. Because um, who's the new GM for SmackDown? Nick Aldis. So Nick Aldis came through. And one of our other students said, "Hey, can you do a favor for us? Can you help us rib rib Brandon?" And he was great about it. He starts searching the locker room. He goes, "Hey, I'm looking for Brandon. Has anyone seen Brandon?" And finally, like Brandon's like, "I'm Brandon." And he goes, "Hey, I heard a lot of great things about you. If you could, can you watch my match and pick out anything that you would change to help me better myself?" And Brandon was like,
mind you,
I mean,
Brandon's only a couple months in.
yeah, he's like, you were an NWA heavyweight champion. What do you want? And he goes, "Well, I just heard great things about you, man. Just do me a favor." And so Brandon stuck to glue to that TV set, watching Nick Aldis's every move in this match.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as the match was done, Nick comes back and he's searching out Brandon. He goes, "Brandon, man, what tips and pointers do you have for me? Because I really am interested on what you think, so I can take my match to the next plateau."
Yeah.
Oh, it was great. But the love for the business that he has, I think he's going to be one to go somewhere. And if I tell you, if you write a sequel to this book, which I'm sure you probably will,
I thought about it.
I'll give you his information too, so you can get a hold of him.
Okay. Yeah, Kurt. Kurt is a guy that just kind of fell into the book. Honestly, I was in Kansas City for a year last year, and that's how I kind of got to hear about Kurt. Was him being from the KC area. I heard about him as a wrestler, and I kind of knew his story. He gotten injured, and
yes,
it's in the book. I don't want to give it all away, but
right.
he had tore up. I think he tore up his shoulder, and he was pretty close to signing. I think with NWA at the time, and when he got hurt, that all went away. So now he's slowly working his way back to hopefully, that's one of his goals is to hopefully sign with, if not them, another organization.
Right. Yeah.
Well, it can be done. Look what happened a couple days ago. CM Punk and Randy Orton's back, but we'll talk about that in the second segment of the
show. Yeah, I mean, I remember watching him in the NWA, and I thought for sure because he was good friends with the new champ now.
Yeah, in fact, I interviewed EC3 a couple nights before he won the title here in town, and I was a little abrasive going into it because you never know how EC3 is going to be in an interview, But he was awesome. So I have nothing but positive things to say about my interaction with him too.
Oh, that's awesome. He probably knew that he was going to be the champion here pretty soon and didn't want any negative feedback going towards him.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Before we started recording, you kind of showed us your room there, but in your book, you say you're an avid bobblehead collector. I didn't see any bobbleheads in your room there.
So I almost took that out of the book because I had so this basement is all redone. When I moved back from Kansas City, I sold all my bobbleheads. I had 750 down here.
Oh my God!
On shelves that I'd collected from games and trading and stuff with different collectors. And so I sold them all to two different collectors. They came and bought half and half. But the basement was actually painted red and yellow Kansas City Chiefs colors because I'm a diehard Chiefs fan. In fact, the only thing I love more than wrestling is probably the Chiefs, and that's kind of debatable at times, right? I think right now I'm more into wrestling than I am football. Yeah.
I know we got to get the Hunts to get in contact with you so you can interview Gracie. She's out there doing press right now like crazy.
Oh, yeah? Okay. Very cool. Yeah. So, yeah, I had a ton of bobbleheads, and I just decided, you know what? They don't do anything but sit down here, and they were taking up a lot of room. And I kind of wanted to turn the basement into a place where I could come down and relax. With all the bobbleheads, I just felt crowded. So I'm like, you know what? It's time to part with them. It's been a great hobby of mine for a number of years, but it's time to let them all go. So I did. Found two guys that wanted to buy them, and it took them each several hours to load them all up when they came here to get them, because they
Oh my
literally
gosh.
wrapped each one and then put them in a box and then loaded them up. So it was quite the undertaking. But yeah, I did have them. They're not here anymore.
Do you get the urge when you see one? It's like, oh, I don't have that. Nope, stop.
Yeah, man. I just saw the Royals release their bobblehead schedule for next year. And I'm like, oh man, they got some pretty cool ones coming out. But yeah, I'm done with it. It's just it's an expensive hobby too. It really is, because some of those things, I had a couple that were $400 or $500 a piece that I didn't buy them, but that's what they were worth.
Right. Right.
So I had a bunch of wrestling ones too, which I thought about keeping, but the guys who wanted the collection, they wanted them, so I went ahead and let them go.
Yeah. Man, damn near nowadays, any kind of hobby was going to set you back.
Yeah.
You know, cost of everything nowadays. I collect wrestling figures,
Mhm.
and man, I remember back in the day, $10, you got one,
Yeah.
and now $23 or up.
It's ridiculous. Yeah.
It's crazy.
And
Yeah.
Bobby's collection is, belts and trophies.
Oh, okay.
Still expensive though.
Nice.
uh, so, why the book? Because most people don't, when they write books, if it's nonfiction, they want like behind the scenes stories of the wrestlers or the organizations, but this is basically following your timeline and like friends that you meet throughout the way. What made you decide to write a book about that?
Well, I think you kind of answered the question when you said most people expect to hear the wrestlers' stories. We've all heard those. And that was my thing. It's like, I have access to the wrestlers. I mean, I get to interview whoever I want pretty much whenever, but it's just like, why? And I was just, I was talking to my wife on the way to our Thanksgiving dinner the other night about the book. And because I said, I kind of have a couple ideas for another book that I'm kind of tossing around. And the thing about me is I'm a sports writer by trade. That was my first career, was actually a sports writer for a newspaper. I covered the Rams when they were still in St. Louis, and I've covered Mizzou, the Billikens, the Blues, St. Louis City Soccer. So I'm an all-around sports fan.
Yeah.
But I had been tossing around the idea of writing a book for several years, and I just couldn't find that one thing that stuck.
Uh-huh.
And I had started a few different ideas here and there, some nonfiction, some fiction based on truth. And because my idea was, I always thought about writing a movie script.
Oh.
That was kind of something I was always interested in, is writing a script for a film. I'm a big Quentin Tarantino fan, so I love movies, but I tossed around the idea, and I started getting this particular idea, traveling to different events. I had went to a few WrestleManias with a buddy of mine who's in the book, named Dirty.
Yep.
He's a big XFL guy, so
Yeah.
some people may know who he is. And we were at a particular WrestleMania in Orlando, and this strange guy came up to us and started talking to us at the Hall of Fame ceremony. And turns out he was from Canada, and I'd never met anyone from Canada before. I've still never been to Canada, but we were supposed to get together, and it fell through. But we met. He hung out with us the entire 4 or 5 days we were there. It turned out his hotel room was right next door to ours, 20 miles away from the venue, which was crazy. And
Yeah.
when I came back to St. Louis from that trip, we kept in touch by phone. He wound up coming to Missouri to stay with me for about a week. I took him to a Chiefs game in Kansas City, and we've been friends ever since. And then at the original All In Chicago, I met a couple guys from LA who I became really good friends with, and we actually went to Las Vegas together to watch Double or Nothing when CM Punk won the title for AEW, and we've been friends ever since. We have this chat group, and we talk constantly. So I thought, I've met all these cool people that normally I would never probably talk to in my life because of professional wrestling, and that's our bond.
Yeah.
We get together just to see wrestling shows, and I thought, there's got to be other people with really cool stories out there, how wrestling has kind of changed their life. So I just kind of started. Literally, it started as a drunken night in Las Vegas. I started wandering up and down the strip, drinking one of those big old guitar tequila drinks. And I just started asking wrestling fans. I'd look for anybody in a black T-shirt, because most wrestling fans have black T-shirts. So I'd see a guy be like, "Hey, you got any cool stories about wrestling?" Some of them took my information and they'd get back to me, and nothing really came of it because I didn't think their stories were that interesting. And I guess my first person I really talked to was Kyle Scarborough, and our interview actually started as a article that I wrote for a website about him right when Bray Wyatt came out as the Fiend. And so me and Kyle talked, and I literally never thought about using Kyle for the book until I was working on it. And I thought, you know what? I was just sitting in my classroom one night. I'm a teacher. And I was just sitting in my classroom one night working on it. I'm like, you know what? Kyle's story would be perfect for this. So I threw it in the book, kind of updated it a little bit, and started working on, another part of the book. And lo and behold, about 5 or 6 months later, Bray Wyatt passes away.
Right.
And that kind of changed my whole mentality on the book because that added a whole new level to the story. And for those who don't know, Kyle designed the mask that he wore as the Fiend. Tom Savini created it, but the original sketch and all that came from Kyle. And Kyle also does a lot of shirts for a lot of the wrestlers. Buddy Matthews is a friend of his. But him and Bray were actually buddies. They would text back and forth when they'd come to town. Bray would go there and get tattoo work with Braun Strowman here in Washington, Missouri. And, so I knew about all this, and I thought, that'd be a great story to include in the book. And then when Bray passed, I'm like, I gotta include this. And that was one of the tougher parts of the book to write because I was a big Bray fan. I don't know if I mentioned the story in the book, but when I was at WrestleMania 35, one of the things that kind of motivated me to write this, and anytime I talk about the book, I mention the word passion. If you go to a live event, you see, especially right now, I was just watching Raw earlier, how passionate these fans are. And when I was at WrestleMania 35 when Kofi Kingston won the belt, there were people in the crowd crying. And I'm not a huge Kofi fan by any means. I respect the guy. I think he's a great worker, but it wasn't a huge deal to me. But when I came back, I talked to a friend of mine, and I said, why are you so crazy about this guy winning the title? I don't see it sticking. He goes, well, finally somebody who looks like me won the title. And that's when it hit me. It's like, okay. And with Bray, with me, that's kind of why I like Bray so much, because Bray isn't a body guy. He had a gut, he was by no means, in the best shape. And I think, we all know that kind of got him in a little hot water with Vince, I think, over at WWE at times.
Right.
But he's a guy that looked like a normal, everyday guy. And that's what I loved about him, and his creativity. I think he was one of the most creative guys around, for better or worse sometimes. Some of the stuff that they did with him, I think, went a little overboard, but overall, the dude was a genius when it came to creativity. And to lose somebody like that in a business like this that's based off entertainment is such a shame, because I think there were only big things to come for the guy. So that really hit me, and I felt like I had to tell that story for Kyle.
I totally agree with everything you said. I'm going to add a little bit to the Coffee Kingston. From a wrestler's perspective, someone who's been in the actual business, for someone that that's been with the company forever and never have his due, it's almost kind of like, I hate to say the name, but Benoit. When he finally reached the top and got the championship, before all the other stuff, that was one guy that probably was never, you didn't think it was going to happen.
Right.
Because he was never tall enough. He couldn't talk on a mic. But man, was he such a technical wrestler.
Mm-hmm.
And for him to get the chance to carry the belt, it's just crazy. I love that moment, and I loved it for Coffee as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I
But-
think all of us on this podcast say they didn't do Chris very well anyway, even after he won the belt.
Right.
Well, yeah, I mean, of course, with all the stuff that came after, that was just horrible. But he was never like a Vince's boy. He was short, and Vince still wanted the 300-pounders that are over 6 foot, and Benoit didn't. He wasn't neither of those.
Right.
But Bray, yeah, I mean, they ribbed him right from the get go. Calling him Husky Harris.
Husky. Mm-hmm.
Army tank with the Ferrari engine.
Yep.
But he was such a great character, and he did bring great storylines with his characters. I kind of, what if he was still around? Where would it go to? I mean, there's, like you said, some things I didn't really care for, like the Mountain Dew match.
Right.
I think it was the Dark, Mountain Dew Dark or something like that. Or the one with Randy Orton that was also kind of in that same thing. I can't remember what was weird about that ring, but it was like
a Mania match with I think it was Mania, wasn't it, with Alexa Bliss involved?
I think it was Alexa Bliss. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the things that he had come up with, and it wasn't just like one and done.
Right.
It was the Wyatt family, and that could have gone on forever.
Really could have.
And then the Fiend, that was a totally different character, and that thing, just took off too.
Mm-hmm. I love the Fiend. I was a huge fan. The only thing is, it wouldn't have worked for a long period of time, because once he was beaten, it kind of made him look weak, and that was the whole thing behind the Fiend, is he wasn't supposed to be weak, and so it was a tough road for WWE to straddle with that character, and I totally understand it. But man, when he came, I'll never forget that first night he came out, and I talk about it in the book. I was watching the show at a buddy's house, and we were flipping out. We're like, what in the hell is this? Like, it was shocking to me. And then, the whole lantern, I think, was what got me. And then, the next day when WWE edited out the lantern on YouTube, you knew he had something good, because when you have something good that shocks people, they usually don't want to keep it around.
Right.
They're scared that, their advertisers will pull out or something. It was a little shocking to see that lantern, but man, it was cool. So yeah, one of the more memorable moments for me.
And then speaking of Dirty, I've known Dirty many a years.
Yeah.
He used to do the broadcasting for MMWA, and that was one of the first organizations I used to work for, but I worked there for at least 10 years or so, maybe even a little longer. And you got him right in the book, talking about how loud he is, and you wouldn't think he would be a cool friend to have, but he would do anything for you.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if I talk about it necessarily in the book as a whole, but when I first met him, I couldn't stand the dude.
Right.
He was
Yeah, you did talk about that, but
and all I can remember is we go up to his house at the time, and he's letting people hit him in the head with chairs. And I'm thinking, what in the hell's wrong with this guy? Letting people take free shots with chairs for like $5 a piece, and I couldn't stand him. He would call. He started calling me my wife's ex-boyfriend's name.
Oh, wow.
So, I didn't talk to him for a couple times when I met him, but then somehow we found out that each of us liked wrestling, and that was it. We
Yeah.
became best of friends, and we talk almost every day. I Saturday night when Punk came out, as soon as his music hit, my phone rang and it was Dirty. Like, you said it was going to happen. I said, dude, I was pretty sure it was going to happen. Like,
Yeah.
it was time, So, but yeah, we talk all the time about wrestling. That's kind of our thing. Because
So
he
one of
doesn't
the
know. He
shows.
thinks he knows about football, but he doesn't. He doesn't know anything about football. He
Oh
tries,
man.
but
He
really
must not
doesn't.
be a Chiefs fan then.
He's not. He hates the Chiefs, so he just doesn't know good football.
I know about football, and I'm a Cowboys fan, so.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'll root for
So
him when they play the Eagles.
On the
Dirty.
football, just really quick, I hated Micah Parsons until I started listening to him outside of football. The dude is smart and a nice guy.
Yes.
Still don't like the Cowboys though.
So my
We'll
story
talk
with
about that
Dirty
in
though.
person, mate.
One of the shows that we were having for MMWA, he was doing this again for money, but he was donating all the money. During intermission, he let people kick him in the balls.
Yep.
And when I heard this up in the locker room, because he came up and was, hey, if any of you guys want to, go down there and, and pay for it too, I'm donating all the money. I'm thinking, you want us to kick you in the balls too? And he was all game for it. I'm thinking, oh my God, you're so crazy.
I've done a lot of things for charity, but that is not one thing I would do.
Well, he's got 4 kids, so I guess he figures he doesn't need any more. It's a cheap way to get the problem taken care of.
Yeah.
That's the charity.
I let myself be auctioned off dressed like a girl for charity, and I still wouldn't let myself get kicked in the nuts.
Never. No, I wouldn't either.
Not gonna happen.
Nathan, we're going to need you to keep that to yourself about the whole dressing up as a girl thing.
It was a Halloween bachelor thing for
I don't want to know the
abused
details,
women
Nathan.
and children.
Keep the details
Side
to
note,
yourself.
his name was Charity when he dressed up.
But in the book too, you talk about meeting Hillbilly Jim at one of the bars. I think it was out in South County.
The rec room.
The rec room.
Yeah. So me and Bobby were actually there that night.
Okay.
So I mean, like I said, the book kind of like damn. It was when I was texting you back and forth. I said, "Are you sure we never met?" Because everything in this book keeps lining up of where we should have met somewhere down the line.
Yeah, man. That's crazy how that happens. I used to go to the rec room for the pay-per-views all the time because my mom wouldn't pay for them. And I didn't have anywhere to go to watch them at the time. I was only 16, 17, 18 years old, maybe 20 at the time. And so we would go over there. And it was a good deal because Brian Stoll would usually have his show going live.
The Stranglehold.
Stranglehold, which was awesome. I wish that were still around.
Yes.
But we went over there and they'd have trivia and man, we'd just dominate. And I think they'd give away, little figurines occasionally and stuff like that. But yeah, Hillbilly Jim was there one night. They had a couple other wrestlers there, I think, from time to time too, but I don't remember who they were.
Yeah, I just remember Hillbilly Jim because I took Bobby with me.
I believe I still have the autographed Hillbilly Jim from that meeting of him there.
Okay.
I do as well. It's my LGN. It's sitting in the corner over there.
Yeah.
It's got his autograph on it. But
that kind of stuff still happens, Jeremy. After SICW shows, the legends and the wrestlers, including Bobby and Jim, will always go to the same bar and hang out afterwards for a couple hours. I don't go. I don't know the name of it, but what's the name of the bar you guys go to?
Well, we don't want to get that out. We'll tell him off camera. Because most of the time that's when you're trying to go there and relax and enjoy the rest of the night.
If the fans nearby want a cool bar to go to, I'll say in Carlisle, it's not the one we go to. It's one called Signatures, where there is hundreds of autographed wrestling memorabilia there, mostly pictures, but urns and briefcases and other stuff as well.
See, I'm a
Mr.
Columbia,
Sato.
Illinois kid, so I know Carlisle. I'm a Columbia, Illinois kid, though.
Yeah, if you haven't been to Signatures, check it out.
Okay.
It is a beautiful place because we wrestled out there one night, and he invited us back to his bar, and we were thinking, you're just going back to a bar, have a few drinks, and then go home. We probably stayed there at least probably 2.5 hours looking at the wall, because he had them up in the ceiling.
I was gonna say, not just the wall. He had like a checkerboard with the ceiling tiles where every one was a frame.
Yeah,
but we had to pull Jim back because he kept trying to lick the wall.
Sure.
Probably in the chocolate factory, Jim.
But it was just a cool bar to go to. But by chance, did you go to our May show this year? The year hasn't ended yet. This past May, we had 48 legends at our wrestling show as our fan fest.
Yeah, I was there for a little while. I worked with Herb. I did an interview with Herb to help push the show. And let's see, I talked to Enzo for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I was there for a little bit. Now this year I will be there selling the book. I already have a table reserved.
Good,
So,
Nice.
Good.
Yeah, I plan on being there. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, he's already announced a few. I think he's up to like 13 or 14 of the wrestlers so far that's coming. And I know if he we bounce things back and forth, and if he gets everyone that he wants, man, it's going to put last year's show to shame. And honestly, last year's show was great. Most of the time you go to these fan fests, they're very expensive.
Yes.
One to even get into place, and then to get an autograph, you're looking at an arm and a leg too.
Yeah.
But Herb found a way to just keep it pretty low key on the price, and which allowed a lot more people to come in and have a good time. And then if you were the lucky ones to stayed around or mingled or after hours, we all end up into the bar, or sometimes when the bar closed, where the ring was, we just went all back into that big room and just hung out for the rest of the night, because that's one thing that we love here is talking to the legends and listening to their road stories and everything that happened to them being a wrestler and on the road. It's just great. It's a great time.
Oh yeah.
And speaking of stories, in your book, you say same thing as Jim and the same thing as all of us, really. The storylines and the stories is what bring us in. What storyline hooked you into wrestling?
Oof.
Because Jim, it was the Cody Rhodes storyline that got him back into watching wrestling.
Right. Well, you talked about it too, where we've gone through phases in our lives where we disassociate ourselves with wrestling, but something always brings us back in.
And that's a good point, and I thought of that right away. I'd say, as a kid, anything with Hogan, I was invested in. As a little kid, anything with Hogan, I was invested in. I will tell you, like Jake the Snake and Macho Man's feud, that always kept me interested as a kid. The whole Hogan Savage with Miss Elizabeth in the middle of it, that kept me interested. But you're right, there was a point, and I talk about it a little bit in the book as well. I left wrestling when I was in high school, freshman, sophomore. I was not into wrestling at all, and maybe even like 8th grade. The WWF at that time kind of hit a lull where it was very
cartoony,
and I didn't like that. To me, that wasn't cool. I was never, and I hate to say it, I was never a Bret the Hitman Hart fan. I respect the guy. I think he's a great wrestler, but he just didn't do it for me. So when they put the strap on him, I just didn't care. I was not a big Diesel fan. Those guys didn't. And again, I love Kevin Nash. Talking to him is an experience. Talk about a guy that loves and hates the business, man. I'll tell you what, Jesus Christ. He's happy one day and pissed off the next. You never know with him.
if you ever listen to his podcast, it's like that to the T. Yeah. I mean, one day
Manic
he's all about
bipolar.
it.
I
Next day
think
he doesn't.
what got me back in though was probably Stone Cold. When Stone Cold first came on the scene, that drew my interest. And then DX had me hooked. As a teenage kid,
Right.
DX we'd get in trouble at school for wearing the DX shirts, and football, somebody get tackled, you give them the suck it sign, and coach would go crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was Stone Cold, man. Everyone had the Austin 316 t-shirt. It was crazy. And you would go to those shows, even if it was a house show, it was like going to a freaking rock concert.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I talked about that in the book. My grandpa, I couldn't take to those when I was 16, 17 because they would get pretty raunchy. I mean, he actually would come out with the boob cam and girls would show their boobs in the crowd. And I'm just like, my grandpa can't come to this. He would not be. He would not
Might have
approve.
surprised you. He might have been all for it.
Now, he did take me. The last show we ever went to was a WCW pay-per-view here in St. Louis at the Dome.
Uh-huh.
And it was not good. It was and when I interviewed Bischoff, I love talking to Eric, by the way. If you ever get a chance to talk to Eric Bischoff, man, one of the best interviews ever. He has stories that are endless. But I asked him about he remembers the pay-per-view. He would tell who was there and what the main event was, but I know Goldberg was there. It was just a bad pay-per-view. Like I don't even know what it was called, but I remember we opened a newspaper one morning. I think the morning of the show, it was a Sunday, and we were doing our football picks, and they had a thing, buy one get one free tickets. And my grandpa was like, "You want to go?" Because I think Hogan was there at the time. Hogan was with the NWO, and he's like, "Whoa, Hogan's there," and I'm like, "Yeah, but by that point, the NWO was stale as hell, and nobody cared about it anymore." And I'm like, "Yeah, but at least we can go see Hogan." So we went, and it was probably one of the worst wrestling shows I've ever sat through, to be honest. But that was when they were near the end.
Right. So yeah, but besides the buy one get one, they were also giving away free tickets to that show, and it still didn't do good. But like you said, it was towards the end of the whole NWO thing. I really think, let me ask your opinion on it too. I really think the NWO would have been still great if they didn't allow the whole locker room into the club.
That's when I
that was the
got tired of
downfall.
it.
Yeah, and, even if they,
Conan running when Conan's crew hit, I'm like, I'm out. This is stupid.
Yeah. I think even if they would have split off black and white and then the red, even if they would have just kept that to like a 5-man group on each side, I think it still would have done blockbuster numbers. But since as soon as it all became NWO, and now there's only like 10 people that they can actually wrestle over and over again, you took everything away.
Well, and here's the thing that I'll give credit to the NWO for. It's responsible for spawning a lot of different factions since then. Then the one I look at I look at the Aces and Eights as being very underappreciated. I think that was one of the better factions in the last, few decades. And it didn't get the love it deserved because, TNA just wasn't doing the ratings at the time.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, the first TNA show that I seen, it was back when they were doing the weekly pay-per-views that you can buy, and when I turned in, man, I can't talk today. When I turned in, they had the girls in the cages by the entrance. They had the crazy the wrestling ring, and I was hooked on that right there because they had all the ex-WWF guys, ex-WCW guys. But I think, as much as a Hogan fan that I am, I think once they brought Hogan in the TNA, it was the downfall for them too. You know, even they were doing great when they had Kurt Angle as their main guy. Even Steen came in right around that time period, and they were, both of those guys were the top dogs besides Jarrett. I think they could have just had that momentum keep going, but as soon as they reached down and got Hogan back into the fold, and Hogan didn't like the ring, so he wanted back to being the square ring.
The one thing that made them unique.
Right.
Yeah, the one thing that made them unique, he didn't want.
Yeah, and even Jeff Jarrett talks about it on his podcast that when he went to try to sell merchandise to the Walmarts and everything, they were like, "Well, what makes yours different from everyone else's?" And that was one of the things he brought up: six-sided ring. We are totally different than everyone else, and they bought it and they were hooked, because it was a different type of merchandise that they could put on the shelves. Yeah. And then Hogan just kind of threw that all in the trash.
Like I said, as a kid, I was a huge Hogan fan, and I still, part of me wants to love the guy, but I've had interactions with him. And he's always been great to me. I can't say anything bad about him by that. But I was in his shop one time over WrestleMania, and a little kid came in wanting a photo with him, and he was just in the back. And this girl said, "Oh yeah, he'll come out and take a photo with you." Came out and took a photo with the kid, and then the girl goes, "That'll be $150."
What?
Yeah. And right then, I lost a little bit of respect for the man. I'm like, so what happened was all the people in the store threw in $5-10 and paid for the kid's photo. This kid was like 8 years old.
Oh my God.
With his dad.
No, all of us would have paid for it because that's ridiculous.
Yeah, I was like, come on, Holt, man, this ain't cool.
Yeah. I've met Hogan a few times, and when they came through for their TNA pay-per-view, they grabbed a lot of us local wrestlers to kind of chauffeur them around and be their bodyguards, and during their little fan fest, I stood next to Hogan pretty much the whole night. There was a couple times where I switched up to RVD and then one other person, but during the fan fest, man, he is nothing but great.
Yeah.
And I guess it's because he's getting paid to be there and everything like that. But and then personally, I met him a couple other times just in passing, and he remembered who I was from that show. And I had my kids with me, and we all got pictures with him and everything. Never charged me a single dime. So I've always had good experiences with him, but I think he's gone a little crazy in the head because a lot of his interviews, and it's all over the internet, over YouTube. He makes up stuff left and right. And the latest one is when he was on, I think it was Joe Rogan, and he started talking about Bruiser Brody and how he passed away. I'm thinking, man, everything he said was totally wrong. But I still love the guy. I mean, I've told this many times on the podcast, but my father, growing up, looked just like Hulk Hogan. He was bald on top, long hair across the U shape. He was a tool and die maker, so his arms were just jacked. And I don't know, something in my little kid brain we would always watch wrestling together. So we would watch it together. And in my eyes, I idolized Hogan, and my dad looked like Hogan. So that's what, drew me in.
If it wasn't
for me, it was the same way. The first thing
one at a time, Nate. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Jeremy. Go ahead.
Well, I just, if it wasn't for Hogan, we wouldn't be sitting here.
That's true.
I can honestly say that. I have no problem saying that. If Hulk Hogan wasn't around, I don't think, I think wrestling would still be around, but it would not be near what it is today.
Definitely.
And for me, it was actually Hogan that got me hooked. It was WrestleMania 3 with him and Andre the Giant. And that's what did it for me. And then WrestleMania 4, The Ultimate Warrior. I was hooked on him since.
Yep. All right. So I do want a little bit, I'm going to have some questions about you, but I want to just, again, you can buy your book at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, reach out to you on Facebook. Facebook, you're under your actual name. Well, your Dr.
JM.
Jeremy. Yep. So please reach out to him. It's a great book. I give it 2 thumbs up for it. Hope there's a second edition, or if you keep continuing with your writing,